Hello class, it's Professor Kim Nelson, Jewelry Design Department, Fashion Institute of Technology. Another tutorial on drawing in Rhino 2D drawing. This tutorial will be about tracing and placing background information. Guys, please make sure you've watched and understood the previous tutorial before you go on to this one. Understanding how curves are put together is important before moving on. Alright, first thing I'm going to do is put a background bitmap into my image that I can use to trace. To do that, I'm going to go to View, Background Bitmap, Place. Going to go to the location on my computer where that bitmap is being held. On your computers, it'll be wherever you stored it last week. I'm wondering where I stored it last week. It's on my desktop. Okay. It asks for a first corner. Click somewhere in the upper left. Second corner, drag down like you're doing a window selection, and click. Make it nice and large. There you go. Now, we want to put this in the center of our viewport. We want to make it at a specific size. We want it 50 millimeters wide, basically 2 inches. So, to do that, we need to create reference geometry. Reference geometry for the image, and reference geometry on the C-plane. So, to create the reference geometry for the image, we're going to make a rectangle. Go to Rectangle on the Curve menu, corner. Going to place the cursor just outside the upper left wingtip and come down and make sure you grab the right wingtip and that your box encompasses the bottom tip of the image of the carved motif, and click. That creates a window or a frame that contains that carved motif we're going to be tracing. Now we need to create reference geometry for the bitmap, for the construction plane. We're going to create another rectangle, corner to corner again. This time just click anywhere in the viewport and type in 50 and then 50 again. That will create a 50 millimeter square. We're going to move that into the center of our viewport. Enter to move. Center object snap. Click. Now remember, when you're using a center object snap, you don't reach into the middle of the object. Rhino has to touch the closed curve to calculate its center. So touch the edge of the curve and you'll see that it rubber bands in, and then while still touching the edge of that curve, left click. That's your point to move from the center of that box. Point to move to will be the center, 0. So we now have the reference curve containing our image and the reference curve at scale in the center of our construction plane. Going to now align the bitmap. I'm going to go to View, Background Bitmap, and Align. Click on Align. It's going to ask for the base point on the bitmap. Make your mid-object snap active, and on that bitmap reference curve, click to the left, midpoint. That's the first base point on the bitmap. It's going to ask for a second or reference point on the bitmap. Reach across to the other side of that reference frame at the midpoint and click. No more rubber bands showing. read your command line. It now wants a base point on the C-plane. Going to go to the middle of that reference frame on the C-plane, the middle left side. Click. Asks for a second reference point on the C-plane. Reach straight across to the midpoint on the right side of that reference frame. Click. And you will see that it has scaled and positioned your bitmap exactly where and at the size you want it. We can now delete the two reference frames. Now, during this of our work today with this, we're going to want to alternatively hide and show this bitmap image. To do that, we're going to go to View, Background Bitmap, and to hide it, you click Hide. To show it, you click Show. It's as simple as that. Okay? A good habit for any drawing is to start with a vertical and horizontal reference line in the image. We've done that with pretty much everything so far, and we'll continue to do so. So curve, line, single line, start of line, 0 for the center. Click both sides option so that you can see the line rubber bands out. Hold down the Shift key. Click to make your vertical line. To make your horizontal line, you can repeat that sequence of commands, or you can just rotate a copy of this one. Pre-select, transform, rotate, center of rotation, 0, angle of reference point. We want to first click and make sure it says copy yes. Type in 90. And then hit enter to exit the command. And we now have our cross grid. So, I'm going to pick an element to draw. That's where we begin. So, I'm going to offset this horizontal curve, reference curve, to some important points in the drawing. The top of this arc, the bottom of this scroll, the bottom of this point, the top of the tulip, the bottom of the tulip, the bottom of the scrolled leaf, bottom of the central element, and the bottom of the outer element. I'm going to then use my center line to trim. Now I can click on each one of these guys one at a time, or I can do a crossing selection. From lower right, upper left, I'm going to stop just shy of my green reference curve. It's still active. You can still see it's blinking. Select object to trim. I'm going to do that again. Lower left, upper right, touching each one of those curves. And then hit enter to exit the command. The first sketching curve I'm going to teach you is extend by arc to point. Basically, guys, the process you'll be following when you trace a drawing or create a drawing is you're going to sketch your curves, then you will rebuild your curves, then you will edit your curves. And almost every curve in your drawing will go through that series of steps. It will be sketched, rebuilt, and then edited. So, we're going to do an extend curve. We're going to go to curve, extend curve, by arc to point. I'm going to select this curve. And you can now drag this like a whip, and it will stay tangent, flowing directly out from that parent curve on the left. Play with it until it comes very close to what you want. Now here's a habit for sketching I want you to develop. Don't click right at the point. Don't click right at the tip, because then you have to match that later. It's better to have things overlap. Pull beyond. Click. All right. Do the same thing here. The command is still going here. Only take it as far as it seems to fit. Click. Click. And click. Okay. Next curve I'm going to show you how to use to sketch with is called an interpolate curve. We're going to go to Curve, Freeform, Interpolate Points. Now the way this works, and it's important to show you the difference between the two. Let's do a control point curve first with grid snap. And we'll actually hide our bitmap. Okay. Go back. Curve, freeform, control points. This way you draw a curve using its control points. So we'll click at an intersection using grid point. Click again. Click again. Remember the importance of 3 points in a row? It makes a straight line. Fourth point, and then we'll come over and we'll click 3 points in a row. Fourth point for the corner, and then down. And enter to stop. Okay? Fine. Very predictable. However, it's very tedious to try and draw that way if you're trying to trace something. I'll show you what I mean. I want to trace the outside edge of this curve. See what happens? Remember, control points on a NURBS curve, which is what these are, these splines, are magnets. The only points that are actually on the line are the first one and the last one, which means trying to guesstimate how far away or how close, you can see what a difficult time I'm having. And I've been using Rhino for a very long time. So it's not a very useful sketching curve. It's an important curve to understand and know it's there, but you won't use it all that often. The one you'll be using more is the interpolate curve. Freeform, interpolate points. To show you how different they are, I'm going to come back over and repeat the same drawing I made here. Grid snap, grid snap, grid snap. See what happens there? What Rhino does is it forces the curve to pass through the points. This gives you pretty predictable results as long as you don't make any hard corners. But once you make hard corners, you can see that it's crimping the curve to keep it going through those points. So while drawing in this sort of form, where you're using a grid snap and kind of orthographic going around corners and things, it gives you unpredictable results for tracing. It is much more predictable because the curve, start of curve, it follows through your points. Once again, overshoot your end. Click each time you feel you need to get control and turn a corner. Overshoot the end. Overshoot the end. Interpolate curve will be the curve you will use the most for your freehand drawing. I should have overshot that corner a little more, but it's okay. And actually, I'm drawing this curve, but I'm going to stop and delete it because I'm actually looking at that. It's basically a static width. I'll use an offset curve to draw that. Okay. So now I'm going to refine what I've drawn. When you do an extend by arc, it joins these curves. It joins the parent and child curve. So first thing we want to do is explode that. That turns it back into two separate curves. The math of that curve is somewhat implied by its name. It's extended by arc. It's a second degree curve because it's an arc. Turning on the control points, you'll see it's a 3-point second degree curve. I told you I usually rebuild my curves. This one's useful the way it is. See how that's a straight line out? Remember we talked about tangency in the earlier tutorial. That's how Rhino is maintaining its tangency across there. We're going to select that point, move enter, hold down the shift key. And we can just pull to the side and see how that allows us to kind of sweeten that curve. And as long as we stay ortho, as long as we stay straight out from that parent curve, we remain smooth. I can decide if I want to move the top point at all. It doesn't matter as far as the smoothness in the along here. This will stay tangent as long as these 2 points maintain their relationship. Nothing I do up here will change it much. Okay? That curve is finished. Now, I'm going to teach you a tip. Instead of going up here and going Edit, Control Points Off, hit Escape twice. Okay? You might ask, well, why is it important that I had this here like that, so it's tangent off the straight line? Later, we'll be mirroring the whole drawing over, but for now, I'll mirror this. Transform, mirror, start of mirror plane, 0. Hold the shift key down so you can pull straight up. Remember, to mirror left to right, you create your mirror line up and down. See what the result is. Actually, I'll pull it from here. See, a straight line is a tangent from any axis of a circle or arc. So by doing half of this tangent to that straight line, the other half is automatically tangent with the first. And we have a nice flowing arc. On to the next curve. I'm going to want to rebuild this. I know it automatically. I will turn the control points on just to show. It's a 3rd degree curve. But it's not smooth enough for me. That's okay, I guess. But just out of habit, I'll rebuild it. To rebuild, I think the 8 points is about right still, but I'll take it to a 4th degree curve. Now, by keeping the points the same, but increasing the degree of curvature, what I'm going to do is smoothen that curve out. And if you don't understand that, think about the previous tutorial you watched. Okay? Put on the control points. And I can make this a nice pretty curve. Because while we're tracing, we're not a slave. You're not a slave to that background image. It's a point of departure. You want a nice curve. How can you make sure it's a nice curve? Well, you can also take advantage of that analysis tool. Turn on the curvature graph. And you can see that by playing M-enter for each one of these moves, I'm clicking anywhere in the viewport I want. I just don't want to click too near my points because I don't want to obscure them. I don't want to put my mouse in here because then it's hard to see what I'm doing. I reach away from where I'm working. Click from my first point and just make a relative second point. And I can do this for a long time. There's no point. This is smooth enough. I'm going to hit remove objects, enter. Hide those control points. Nope, it's no longer showing up on my recent commands. So I have to go to the menu, edit, control points, off. Now, once I'm done with the curve, guys, I put it on a different layer. So, edit, layer, change object layer, and I'll pick what my color is going to be for that particular drawing for my finished lines. I'm going to go bright blue. So I know not to go back and work with those. This will be the next curve I work with. Got to rebuild it. I'm going to stick with my 4. 18 is not going to be nearly enough, as you can already see. It's giving me an image, and you can see how far off that's already gone. I'm going to need about, I'm going to actually start with about a 20-point curve. Okay. Turn on the control points. You will get experience the more you draw as far as what is a good workable number of points for the type of curve you're trying to draw. For this tutorial, you get to follow me. What you want is enough points to get control, but not so many points that you're repeating yourself. This is perfect for this part of the curve. However, when I come to this part, the tight curve, this is not enough points. I don't care. I'll make it as good as I can and call it good. I will check it with my curvature graph, so I'm going to hit Add Objects, click on the curve and hit Enter. The display scale is kind of crazy. Now if the background image is kind of confusing me, I'll hide it. You'll notice that the end point, the second to the end point, often creates kind of a spike. It's a clamp. Rhino kind of really clamps down at the end of the curves. Sometimes I'll remove that point. I'll show you how to do that another time, maybe later in this tutorial. But usually I just go in and adjust it, tweak it a little bit. See, I'm not peeping my image up because I'm really more interested in my curve itself. I know that follows the image pretty closely. But I have something the sculptor didn't have. I have a computer with a curvature analysis graph. And now you can see as I come into here that this gets crazy, and that's fine. What I'm going to do, escape twice to hide the points, remove this object from the curvature graph. I'm going to rebuild it again. The idea is you rebuild it with as few points as you need in the first place for the big, long curves. As you come into the small, tight curves, you're going to rebuild it again with a higher point count. And now I'm going to be very careful to look and see how much it changes my line. I'm going to maybe add 5 control points. And you can see this is staying the same. It's changing it in here, but that's fine. Hit OK. Add it to my curvature graph. Turn on my control points. OK. You know what? I'm going to remove it from the graph. And I'm going to undo my rebuild. I'm going to rebuild it again with more points. 28. Hit OK. Put it on there. Bring my control points back. That's good. I'm going to take the display scale down a little more. A tip, generally the more graceful and slow your curve is, the longer your curve, the more of a display scale you need, the bigger the scale gets. As the curve tightens, they tend to flare, and so when you're dealing with a tighter curve, you'll reduce that scale. And that's enough. I'm going to bring back my background image. And you can see I've deviated just a little bit. But I don't mind because I know that it's a nice, graceful curve. Add that to my finished curves. Now I'm going to come in here and do this curve. Rebuild it. I think I'm going to need 10 points. Here's an example where Rhino has thrown these little teeny points at the end really close together. It's going to make my job difficult. So now I will remove points. Edit, control points, remove control point. Select the curve or surface. Select the point on the curve. Hit enter to repeat the command. I'm just going to remove that second anchor point at both ends of the curve. It makes a little easier curve for me to work with. I know Rhino's trying to look out for me by adding that extra anchor curve, but when it comes to editing, they can be difficult. That looks good. Going to add this to the curvature graph display. Do you have to do this with every curve you draw? No. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Some people get very compulsive about it and spend way too much time playing with that. Turning off the control points, changing the layer. That curve is done. This curve is actually a very simple arc. I think I can actually leave it the way Rhino made it. I might adjust it just a little bit. Let's take a look at the curvature graph and turn the control points on. It's a third-degree curve. You see the little points it starts to create on the curvature graph? That's because it's not a very high degree of curvature. But for as long as that is, I should say as for as short as it is. By the way, you can select 2 points at once and move them together. I did that with a window selection. If you select all the points and move them, you can probably figure out what happens. You move the whole curve. Not the greatest looking curvature graph, but I know looking at the curve it's fine. I'm less concerned with short segments of curve. This one also looks pretty good, but it's too long for me to not rebuild it. I'm going to rebuild it. 10 points is plenty enough. 8's probably going to suffice. Yeah. Add it to the curvature graph. That's fine the way it is. I'm not going to move anything. By changing the degree to the 4th degree curve, it smoothed it out, and it was fine. This one, it's going to need at least a 12, and I'm going to say it's probably going to need about 15. Yeah, so you can see that it stays pretty close at that point. Put the curvature graph on. Put the control points on. It's another reason for dragging your curve beyond the edge of your point, because those extra clamps at the end, they get moved out of your way a little bit. And just to save time, it takes those few extra seconds to go in and remove that point. That's nice. I mean, I could increase the scale of the grid and find things I want to change, but why look for trouble? It's smooth enough. I do want to see how nice it looks, though, compared to the other one without that background bitmap to influence me. You know what? It's kind of clunky. It's fat here. It's narrow here. So I'm going to keep that background bitmap off. And using my own nice sensitive artistic eye, which hopefully you all have as well, Sure you do. You're going to come in and make a curve look nice. It doesn't really matter if it's matching that background reference at this point. I'll add my, now I will boost that a little. Smoothen it out a little bit. And there we go. That's fine. I'm going to remove it. Okay. And guys, if you would, I'm going to take a break for about 2 minutes quick. It's a good chance for you to get up and step away from your computer. I'll be right back. I'd be much more worried about how to get nice forms. Think of yourself as a digital sculptor. When you're making pretty jewelry, when you're making pretty forms, then get into Rhino Gold and figure out how to put down lots of fancy stone lines. Oh yeah, well you would want to talk to maybe Michael or Miss Wendy, because they may know more about the graduation requirements and stuff. You're just adding to your course load. But there's not a problem with them signing up for their jewelry design classes. They're studio majors. If they want to take a design
if it fits, you got to make sure on your DARS report that you have what you're required. And if Michael's the best person to ask about that as an elective. I think you can, but you need to ask him because you have to take the other stuff. Period.
Yeah. So
okay.
Make sure it doesn't jeopardize your graduation. I'd love to see it. All right. You bet. Yeah, actually. Yeah, it's a good idea. Thanks. Candy's not bad. Kim, don't forget you have people sitting there watching a tutorial, waiting for the next thing you're going to say. Okay, sorry for the interruption, I'm back. So we've drawn this curve. I'm going to put it onto the different color. And we've finished this element. What's happening here? Hold on. Yes. Now, by doing an offset of this curve, so just do curve offset. Okay. Now, I could grab this curve, turn on control points, edit them, and move them into position. Because it's a little narrower here. But I'm going to scale it instead. I'm going to do what's called a non-uniform scale. Transform, scale, non-uniform. For the origin point, I'm going to pick the point that I don't want to change. That's the intersection right there. Now I can scale it this way, which is not what I want to do. So I will accept what the last one was, which is 1. A scale factor of 1 means that the geometry will not change. And now I have the y-axis, the vertical. Picked my first point, now I'm picking my second point. Click, and Z, I'm going to accept 1. Hit enter, and I'm finished. I apologize. I'm going to repeat that. Non-uniform scale, origin point, the intersection point there that I do not want to change. X-axis is fine, so I'll accept 1. If that was a different value, I would type in 1 to make sure it did not change. Y-axis, up and down, this I want to change, so asks you either to enter a mathematical number, I could type in like 50%, 0.5, or 20%, 0.2, or to pick a first reference point. I'm going to pick my first reference point. And now it wants a second reference point in that direction. So I'll pick it. It's finished with that direction. And this is where people often get confused. They're like, okay, I'm done. What's wrong? Don't forget, it wants to know how you want to change this in all 3 axes. If you don't, this is already 1, so we can just hit enter. If it were a different value, we would put in 1 and enter. There. We have drawn that out, that motif. Now, how do I tidy up all of this? Well, I'm going to show you one of my favorite shortcuts. Actually, change this to the finished color, blue. And that's fillet. I'm going to go to curve, fillet curves. When you create a fillet on a curve, it puts a curve between these 2 objects. So, for example, first thing you have to do is put in a radius. The current radius is 1. I'm going to put in 0.2. Pick the first curve. They have to intersect each other. Pick the second curve. Actually, they don't have to intersect each other. They have to be in at least in an orientation where they would eventually intersect each other. And there. Rhino put a lovely little 0.2 millimeter radius curve, arc, between those 2. I don't want a little arc. I want to use this as a trimming tool. So rather than putting in 0.2, I'm going to put in 0. That allows you to put a radius of nothing between them. Click first curve, click second curve. Click first, repeat the command by hitting enter or your spacebar. First curve, second curve. Repeat the command. Repeat the command. Repeat the command. Repeat the command. Now here, it's a question. Do you want this to be an exact trim, or do you want it to overlap a little? I want it to overlap, so I'm going to go to the trim command instead. Select the little ball, enter. I'm going to trim this, and while I have it selected, I'm going to trim away that. This is still too long now, so I'm going to use a split command. It asks for a cutting object. For example, if I selected this curve and hit enter, this curve will have split this one. The difference between trim and split is that trim throws away the part you don't want. Split leaves everything there. It just splits or partitions the curve at a particular point. I don't want it to split there, so I'm going to repeat the command. Select objects to split. Okay. Select a cutting object. I'm going to choose the point option. And now you can select a point to split the curve. Object snaps work with this, by the way. But I wanted just this spot right here. And you can keep splitting and splitting, so you have to press enter when you've finished. And then I will throw away that piece on the end. Okay? Just throw that away for now. I'm going to drag a window selection around all of those blue curves. I'm going to go Edit, Join. I'm going to mirror. Start of mirror plane, 0, middle. Remember to pull straight up and down to mirror left to right. Select all of those blue lines with a window selection. Notice how that even though it touches these other things, since it doesn't completely surround them, the window selection does not select them. If I had used a crossing selection in the other direction, from lower right to upper left, it would have. Window select all the blue. And I'm going to group these. Actually, I'll join them. And some of these can't be joined. So to make sure they all stay in one unit, I will group them. Okay. Turn off the background bitmap. And you can see we've done a very nice tracing of that segment of our drawing. Okay. I'm going to clean up a little bit. Bring the bitmap back. Okay. That's all of the freeform geometry we're going to trace at this point. I will show you how to trace this frame a little bit. Take that horizontal reference curve, offset curve, through point, as you probably guessed. I can't see where that arc is, so I'm not going to try and catch that point. I'm going to catch this point instead up here at the corner. I'm going to use this curve and do the same command, through point to here. I'm going to mirror this. In fact, what I should do, instead of mirroring it, I'll do it the way I was supposed to. Mirror it, both sides option, through point, there. Okay. And then I want to do that again. B enter, T enter for both options, through point. And catch that corner as well. I'm going to use my fillet command. as a trim tool. So make sure it's set to 0. Click and click. Click. Oh, repeat the command. Click, click. I'm going to click and click. Actually, that last one was not a good idea. Because if I click over here, I lose it over there. So I'm going to use a trim command. Pre-select these two curves as a trim tool. Trim. And then we can throw those curves away. To get this arc class, I'm going to use a circle or an arc command. I'm deciding it as I go. I'm going to do the arc. See if I can do start end direction. See how that works. First point. Repeat that. So you watch the command line. Start of arc. End of arc. Direction. Pull down till you have a nice semblance of that arc. And click. Okay. I want to join these together. And then we're going to offset through point. Grab that fresh offset curve, offset again through point. Use a crossing selection, dragging from lower right to upper left, touching those curves. That will select them all. Change them to the finished curve layer. And that concludes this tutorial. I will turn off the background bitmap. So you can see the finished tracing. All right. Thanks a lot. Good luck with this, and we will speak next week in class. Thanks, guys.